I bought the house on Oakwood Street because it was a steal. My name is Anna. I'm 31, and I work as a software engineer for a tech company that went fully remote during the pandemic. Well, I decided to leave my expensive city apartment and buy something I could actually afford. This 1920s Tudor caught my eye immediately. The listing price was almost $30,000 below comparable homes in the area. Previous owners started some renovations, but never finished. The realtor explained as we walked through. That's why the price is so competitive. It needs someone willing to put in some work. The house had good bones, original hardwood floors, beautiful built-in bookcases, a stone fireplace in the living room. But there were obvious signs of abandoned renovation projects. Half-painted walls, electrical work that had been started but not completed, sections where old wallpaper had been stripped but never replaced. Do you have the original blueprints? I asked. I'd like to see the layout before I start planning my own renovations. The sellers included all the paperwork they had, she said, handing me a folder. Blueprints should be in there. I closed on the house 6 weeks later and immediately started planning the renovation work I wanted to do. The first priority was finishing the electrical upgrades and painting the rooms that had been left half done. When I spread out the original 1923 blueprints on my kitchen table, I noticed something odd. According to the plans, the house should have had a small closet under the main staircase. But when I looked at the actual staircase, there was no closet door, just a solid wall covered in the same wallpaper as the rest of the hallway. I figured the closet had been sealed up at some point during previous renovations. Maybe the space had been too small to be useful, or there had been plumbing issues. Old houses often had modifications that weren't reflected in the original blueprints. But when I tapped on the wall where the closet should be, it sounded hollow. The next weekend, I decided to investigate. I carefully cut through the wallpaper and drywall with a utility knife, creating a small opening to see what was behind the wall. There was definitely a space back there. My flashlight beam revealed a small room, maybe 4 feet wide and 6 feet deep, with the underside of the staircase forming a sloped ceiling. But it wasn't empty. The closet contained several cardboard boxes, a folding chair, and what looked like a small camping lantern. Everything was covered in dust, but not the heavy dust of decades. This looked like someone had been using this space recently. I widened the opening enough to climb inside. The boxes contained clothes, men's clothing in size medium, neatly folded. T-shirts, jeans, underwear, socks. Nothing expensive or distinctive, just basic everyday clothes. The kind of things someone might need if they were staying somewhere temporarily. Under the clothes in one box, I found a composition notebook filled with handwritten entries. The handwriting was neat and small, and as I read through it, I realized it was some kind of observation log. March 15th, new owners moved in today. Young couple, no children. She works from home. He leaves every morning around 8:30. March 22nd, they're painting the master bedroom. She picked light blue. He wanted green, but didn't argue. April 3rd, big argument tonight about money. Kitchen renovations cost more than expected. She cried after he went to bed. April 18th, he's been coming home late from work. She suspects something, but hasn't confronted him yet. The entries continued for months, documenting intimate details about the lives of people who had apparently lived in this house. The most recent entry was dated just 3 months ago. I sat in that hidden closet, reading page after page of someone's private life being cataloged by a stranger, and felt sick. Someone had been living in my house, watching the previous owners, taking notes about their relationship, their habits, their problems. I called the police. Detective Morrison came out that afternoon. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s who listened patiently as I explained what I'd found. So you're saying someone was living in a hidden space in your house? Not living exactly, but using it. There's a chair, a lantern, clothes, and months of written observations about the previous owners. He examined the hidden closet and flipped through the notebook. This is definitely unusual. Do you have contact information for the previous owners? I gave him the phone number I had for them. While he called, I continued looking through the boxes. In the bottom of the second box, I found something that made my hand shake. A key. It was labeled with a small piece of masking tape that said, "Master Bedroom." Detective Morrison finished his phone call. I spoke with Mr. Reynolds, the previous owner. He says they did notice some strange things while they lived here. Items moved around, food missing from the kitchen, sounds in the walls. They assumed it was mice or normal old house settling. Did they know about this closet? No idea it existed. He's pretty shaken up about this. The detective took the notebook and some of the other items as evidence, but he warned me that without knowing who had been using the space, it would be difficult to pursue charges. Change all your locks immediately, he advised, and you might want to consider a security system. After he left, I started wondering what else might be hidden in the house. I spent the next week going over every room with the original blueprints, looking for discrepancies. Most of the layout matched perfectly, but I found two more anomalies. The first was in the master bedroom. According to the blueprints, there should have been a small storage nook built into the wall behind the headboard area. But when I measured the room, that wall seemed about 3 feet thicker than it should be. I cut through the drywall and found another hidden space. This one was larger, big enough for someone to stand in comfortably. It had been set up like a tiny apartment. A sleeping bag, battery-powered camping lights, a small cooler, and shelves made from boards and cinder blocks. On the shelves were dozens of photographs, pictures of the previous owners taken through windows. The couple eating dinner, watching TV, arguing in the kitchen, sleeping in bed. Some of the photos have been taken from impossible angles, suggesting they'd been shot from inside the house. There are also photos of me. Pictures of me moving boxes into the house on the day I'd moved in. Me painting the living room. Me working on my laptop by the front window. Me sleeping in my bed. Someone had been watching me just like they'd watched the previous owners. I called Detective Morrison immediately. This time, he brought a full forensics team. They processed both hidden spaces for fingerprints and DNA evidence, photographed everything, and took all the surveillance materials as evidence. We're treating this as stalking and breaking and entering now, Detective Morrison told me. This person has been committing serious crimes. Are they still here? Could they still be getting into the house? We'll dust for prints on all your doors and windows, but you should stay somewhere else until we finish the investigation. I packed a bag and went to stay with my friend Jessica in town. The forensics team spent 3 days going through my house. They found evidence that someone had been coming and going regularly. Recent fingerprints on window sills, footprints in the basement, signs that food had been taken from my kitchen. But they also found something else. There's a third space Detective Morrison called to tell me. Behind the fireplace in the living room. We found it when we were checking the structural integrity of the hidden rooms. What was in it? You need to see this for yourself. When I returned to the house, Detective Morrison led me to the living room. They had removed part of the stone facade around the fireplace, revealing another hidden compartment. This one was different from the others. Instead of being set up as a living space, it was more like an office. There was a small desk, a battery-powered laptop, and filing cabinets full of documentation. He's been doing this to multiple houses, Detective Morrison explained. We found files on at least 12 different properties over the past 5 years. Always the same pattern. Find houses with renovation projects, create hidden spaces during the construction chaos, then spy on the occupants. The files contain detailed floor plans that have been modified to show the hidden spaces, schedules of the residents' daily routines, and photographs of multiple families and individuals. Who is he? We're still working on that. No clear fingerprints yet, and the laptop was wiped clean. but we think he's a contractor or someone with construction experience. The hidden spaces were built professionally. Is he coming back? I don't think so. This setup was too elaborate to abandon lightly. If he left this much evidence behind, it's probably because he knew we were getting close. I never found out who had been living in the walls of my house. The police investigation continued for months, but they never identified the person responsible. The case is still technically open. I had all the hidden spaces sealed with concrete and steel reinforcement. I installed a comprehensive security system with cameras covering every angle of the house. I changed all the locks twice, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he might have built other spaces I hadn't found yet. Last month, I hired a structural engineer to x-ray the entire house, looking for any other anomalies. The scan revealed that the basement floor had been poured in 2 different stages. Most of it was original to the house, but a section near the back wall had been redone much more recently. When we jackhammered through that section, we found a crawl space that led to a tunnel extending under the backyard. The tunnel was empty, but it connected to the storm drain system that ran under the street. Someone had built a way to come and go from my house without ever being seen. I'm selling the house. The new buyers think they're getting a great deal because I'm pricing it well below market value. I haven't told them about the tunnels. I figure if I can't sleep peacefully here, why should I be the only one to suffer? But sometimes I wonder if sealing up those spaces and changing the locks actually solved anything, or if it just forced him to find a new way in. I moved to Maple Street because it seemed like the perfect quiet neighborhood. I'm Lisa, 28 years old, and I work as a marketing coordinator for a small nonprofit. After years of apartment living with paper-thin walls and constant noise, I was thrilled to find a small rental house in a residential area where the biggest excitement was the weekly garbage pickup. The house was a modest 2-bedroom bungalow with a small front yard and a back patio. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and it was peaceful. My neighbors seemed friendly enough, a young couple with a toddler on one side, and an elderly woman named Mrs. Kowalski on the other. Mrs. Kowalski appeared to be in her 70s, a small woman with gray hair always pulled back in a tight bun. She kept her yard immaculate, with flower beds that were obviously tended with great care. In the first few weeks after I moved in, she brought me homemade cookies twice and offered helpful advice about local services. The garbage trucks come early on Mondays, she told me. Put your bins out Sunday night, or they'll miss you. There's a good grocery store on 5th Street. Much better prices than the chain stores. Watch out for the mail carrier. He's lazy and sometimes doesn't deliver packages if he thinks no one's home. She seemed like exactly the kind of neighbor you'd want. Helpful, considerate, and invested in keeping the neighborhood pleasant. The first sign something might be wrong was the newspapers. After I'd been living there about 6 weeks, I noticed that Mrs. Kowalski's newspaper was often still lying in her driveway when I got home from work. Not just one day, but consistently. The papers would pile up for 3 or 4 days, then suddenly disappear all at once. I assumed she was going out of town regularly, maybe visiting family or spending time at a daughter's house. But her car was always in the driveway, and I could see lights on in her house at night. One evening, I decided to be neighborly and collect the papers for her. When I knocked on her door to let her know I had them, she answered quickly, as if she'd been standing right behind the door. "Oh, Lisa dear, how thoughtful," she said, taking the newspapers. But she seemed nervous, glancing over my shoulder at the street. "Are you feeling all right, Mrs. Kowalski?" I noticed the papers had been piling up. Fine. Just been busy. Thank you for thinking of me." She closed the door quickly, and I heard multiple locks clicking into place. The next morning, I saw her through my kitchen window. She was standing in her backyard, still wearing a nightgown at 10 a.m., staring intently at something in the neighbor's yard across the back fence. She stood there for almost an hour, completely motionless. When I looked again around lunchtime, she was gone. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more odd behavior. Mrs. Kowalski began spending long periods standing at her front window, peering out through the curtains. Not just casual looking, but focused surveillance. She'd stand there for hours, watching the street. Sometimes I'd catch her staring directly at my house. When our eyes met through the windows, she'd quickly step back from the curtain, but I could still see her shadow moving behind it. She also started doing yard work at strange hours. I'd hear her outside at 6 a.m. or 10 p.m., watering plants or rearranging flower pots in the dark. While I looked out, she'd be working with a small flashlight, moving around her yard in what seemed like random patterns. I mentioned it to my coworker Jennifer during lunch. "Sounds like she might be developing dementia," Jennifer said. "My grandmother went through something similar. Started doing things at odd hours, became suspicious of everyone, forgot normal social cues. Should I do something? Call someone? Does she have family you could contact?" It's tricky because she's not technically doing anything wrong. I realized I didn't know anything about Mrs. Kowalski's family or personal life. In all our conversations, she'd asked about me, but never volunteered information about herself. That weekend, I decided to try talking to her again. When I knocked on her door Saturday afternoon, it took a long time for her to answer. I could hear her moving around inside, and at one point I was sure I heard her whisper, "Is it safe?" When she finally opened the door, she was holding a kitchen knife. "Mrs. Kowalski, it's just me, Lisa, from next door." She looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to place who I was. Then her expression cleared. "Oh, Lisa dear, I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else." She lowered the knife, but didn't put it away. "What can I do for you? I just wanted to check on you. Make sure you're doing okay." "I'm fine. Just being careful. There are people watching the house." "What people?" She glanced around nervously. "They come at night. Park across the street. Watch the windows. Sometimes they walk around a backyard. I've seen them." I looked across the street. It was a normal suburban scene. Kids playing in a yard, someone washing their car, nothing suspicious. "Mrs. Kowalski, are you sure? I haven't noticed anyone unusual." Her eyes narrowed. "You're new here. You don't know what to look for yet. But they're there. They're always there." She closed the door, and I heard the locks turning. That night, I paid closer attention to the street outside my windows. I saw the usual evening activity. People coming home from work, dogs being walked, teenagers riding bikes. Nothing that seemed like surveillance. But around 11 p.m., I noticed Mrs. Kowalski's porch light turn on and off repeatedly. 3 short flashes, then 3 long ones, then 3 short again. Like Morse code. She did it for about 10 minutes, then stopped. The next morning, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. In shaky handwriting, it said, "They know you've been watching too. Be careful. Trust no one. A friend." I was pretty sure it was from Mrs. Kowalski, but the handwriting was so erratic I couldn't be certain. That evening, things escalated. I was making dinner around 7 p.m. when I heard loud knocking on my front door. Not normal knocking, hard, aggressive pounding that went on for almost a minute. When I looked through the peephole, Mrs. Kowalski was standing on my porch. She was wearing a heavy winter coat, even though it was late September, and she was carrying what looked like a baseball bat. "Lisa, open the door. They're coming." I opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Mrs. Kowalski, what's wrong?" "I saw them in your backyard. 3 men, all in dark clothes. They were looking in your windows." She was breathing hard, and her eyes were wide with panic. "When?" "Just now. 20 minutes ago. I called the police, but they hung up on me. Said I was imagining things." Her voice was getting louder and more agitated. "Let me check my backyard," I said. I walked through my house and looked out every back window. The yard was empty. The gate was still latched, and there were no signs that anyone had been back there. When I returned to the front door, Mrs. Kowalski was pacing on my porch, muttering to herself. "Mrs. Kowalski, I don't see anyone. Maybe you. They're gone now. Of course they're gone. They saw me watching." She turned to face me, and I could see she was crying. Why won't anyone believe me? I felt sorry for her, but I was also getting scared. She was holding that bat awfully tightly. "Maybe you should go home and get some rest," I suggested gently. "Rest? I can't rest. They're planning something." She raised the bat slightly. "You need to be prepared to defend yourself." "Mrs. Kowalski, please put the bat down. You're scaring me." She looked at the bat as if she'd forgotten she was holding it. "Oh, sorry. I need to protect the neighborhood. Someone has to." She lowered the bat and walked back to her house, but she turned around several times to look at my windows. I called the non-emergency police line to report the incident. "Has she threatened you directly?" the dispatcher asked. "Not exactly, but she was carrying a bat and acting very agitated. We can send someone to do a welfare check if you think she's a danger to herself or others." 2 officers arrived about an hour later. I watched from my window as they knocked on Mrs. Kowalski's door and spoke with her for about 10 minutes. She seemed calm and coherent, smiling and nodding. Whatever she told them must have been convincing, because they left without taking any action. The next few days were quiet, and I started to think maybe the episode had been a one-time thing. Then I found the cameras. I was taking out my garbage on Thursday morning when I noticed something small and black attached to the telephone pole in front of my house. When I looked closer, it was clearly a small surveillance camera pointing directly at my front door. I called the police again. This time, a detective came out to look at the camera. "It's not sophisticated," she told me. "Looks like something you could buy at any electronics store. Battery powered, probably records to a memory card. Do you think my neighbor put it there? Hard to say without fingerprints, but given what you've told me about her recent behavior, it's possible." The detective removed the camera and said they'd check it for evidence. She also advised me to document any future incidents and consider getting a restraining order if Mrs. Kowalski's behavior continued to escalate. That weekend, I found 2 more cameras, one in a tree by my driveway and another attached to the fence between our properties. But when the police went to question Mrs. Kowalski about the cameras, they found her house empty. Her car was in the driveway, but she was nowhere to be found. They did a welfare check with her landlord, who let them inside. The house was in complete disarray. Furniture was barricaded against windows. Every mirror in the house had been covered with sheets, and the walls were covered with newspaper clippings and hand-drawn maps of the neighborhood. In the kitchen, they found a notebook filled with detailed observations about every house on the street. Times when people left for work, descriptions of their cars, notes about visitors, and daily routines. My house had an entire section to itself, with notes about my schedule, my habits, and detailed descriptions of what I wore each day. The most disturbing entry was from the night before. Subject appears unaware of surveillance. Recommend direct contact soon. They never found Mrs. Kowalski. Her landlord said she'd paid rent through the end of the month, but she never returned to the house. Her car remained in the driveway for 2 weeks before it was towed. The police checked with local hospitals and social services, but no one matching her description had been admitted or asked for help. Mental health episodes can sometimes lead to wandering behavior, Detective Martinez explained. She might have gotten confused and walked away, or she could have had family that came to get her. But no family ever came forward, and none of the neighbors had ever seen any relatives visiting. The house has been empty for 3 months now. The landlord is looking for a new tenant, but so far no one has moved in. Sometimes I still find myself checking the street for surveillance cameras or looking out my windows to see if anyone's watching from Mrs. Kowalski's house. Because the thing that bothers me most isn't that she was mentally ill or confused. It said in all her paranoid ramblings about people watching the neighborhood, she was right about one thing. Someone was watching. It was her. My name is Kate. I'm 26 and work at a bank downtown. When I found a house on Pine Street, I thought I got really lucky. The rent was cheap, way cheaper than other places I looked at. The house was small but nice, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a big backyard. It was perfect for me and my dog Max. Why is the rent so low? I asked the landlord, Mr. Garcia. He seemed nervous. The last tenant moved out fast. Didn't give much notice. I need someone reliable. What happened? Was there a problem with the house? No problems. She just left. Said it wasn't a good fit. I should have asked more questions. But the house was in my budget, and I needed to move quickly. I signed a lease that day. Moving day was easy. The house was completely empty when I arrived. No furniture, no mess to clean up. Just bare rooms with clean walls and floors. Max loved the backyard right away. He ran around sniffing everything, his tail wagging. I felt good about the choice. For the first month, everything was great. The house was quiet and comfortable. I set up my bedroom in the back room because it got good morning light. I used the front room as a living room and office. Then I found the newspaper article. I was cleaning out the kitchen cabinets when I found it. Someone had used old newspaper to line the shelves. Most of it was normal stuff, grocery store ads, sports scores. But one piece caught my eye. The headline said, "Local woman still missing after 3 weeks." I pulled the paper out carefully and read it. The article was about a woman named Amy Chun who disappeared from her home on Pine Street. She was 23 years old. She worked at a coffee shop downtown. The address in the article was my address. Amy Chun had lived in my house, and she had vanished without a trace. I sat at my kitchen table, reading the article over and over. According to the story, Amy's friends got worried when she didn't show up for work. They called the police. When officers came to check on her, they found her car in the driveway and her purse on the kitchen counter. But Amy was gone. There were no signs of a break-in, no signs of a struggle. She had just disappeared. The article was dated 2 years ago. I went online and searched for more information. I found 3 more articles about Amy's disappearance. The police had investigated for months. They questioned neighbors, checked security cameras, and searched the nearby woods. They never found any clues. Amy Chun was still missing. That night, I called my sister Jenny. "You're living in a house where someone disappeared?" she said. "Kate, that's creepy. Are you okay there?" I mean, it was 2 years ago, and the police said there was no evidence of anything bad happening in the house. Still, don't you feel weird about it? I did feel weird about it, but I couldn't afford to move again so soon. And really, what were the chances that something dangerous would happen twice in the same place? The next few days were normal. I went to work, came home, took Max for walks. I try not to think about Amy Chun, but then things started feeling different. It was small stuff at first. I come home and feel like something had moved. Not anything obvious, just a feeling that things weren't exactly how I left them. One morning, I was sure I had left my coffee mug in the sink. When I got home from work, it was in the dishwasher, clean and put away. Another day, I found my bedroom window open. I always kept it closed because Max might jump out, but there it was, open about 6 inches. I started paying closer attention to details before I left for work. I take pictures of rooms with my phone so I could check if anything changed. Most days, everything looked the same, but sometimes small things were different. A book moved from one table to another. A chair turned slightly. The bathroom door closed when I was sure I'd left it open. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I was moving things and forgetting. Maybe Max was somehow doing it. But Max was always in his crate when I was at work. 3 weeks after finding the newspaper article, I found something else. I was looking for a pen in the kitchen junk drawer when I felt something taped to the back of the drawer. I pulled it out. It was a small key with a paper tag that said bedroom closet. I went to my bedroom closet. I'd been using it to hang my clothes, but I'd never looked at it carefully. When I examined the back wall, I found a small keyhole hidden behind a loose board. The key fit perfectly. Behind the board was a space about the size of a shoebox. Inside the space was a manila envelope. My hands are shaking as I opened it. The envelope contained photographs. Pictures of the house from different angles. Pictures of the backyard, the front door, the windows. Some were taken during the day, others at night. But these weren't normal real estate photos. These looked like surveillance pictures, like someone had been watching the house for a long time. At the bottom of the envelope was a note written in neat handwriting. He comes back every few months. Always at night. Always through the back door. The lock doesn't stop him. He has a key. I've been documenting everything, but I don't think the police believe me. If something happens to me, show them these pictures. Amy. I dropped the envelope. The photos scattered across my bedroom floor. Amy Chin had been hiding evidence in my house. Evidence that someone had been stalking her. Someone with a key to the house. I called the police immediately. Officer Thompson came to my house that evening. He was a young guy who listened carefully as I explained what I'd found. This could be important evidence in the Chun case, he said, looking through the photos. We'll need to take all of this to the detective who worked on her disappearance. Officer Thompson, do you think this person might still be coming to the house? He was quiet for a moment. It's possible. You should consider staying somewhere else until we can investigate further. I don't really have anywhere to go. What about changing the locks? Amy's note said he had a key. What if he just gets another one? Officer Thompson helped me move my dresser in front of the back door that night. He also gave me his direct phone number and told me to call if anything seemed suspicious. After he left, I sat in my living room with Max, thinking about Amy Chun. She had lived in the same house, probably sat in the same room, scared and trying to figure out what to do about someone who was stalking her. And now she was gone. That night, I barely slept. Every small sound made me jump. The house settling, the wind outside, Max shifting in his bed. I kept thinking I heard footsteps in the backyard. Around 3 a.m., Max started growling. He was looking toward the back of the house, his ears up and his body tense. I'd never seen him act like that before. I grabbed my phone and called Officer Thompson. I think someone's outside, I whispered. I'm on my way. Don't go outside and don't turn on any lights. I sat in the dark living room with Max, listening. For about 10 minutes, I didn't hear anything unusual. Then I heard it, the sound of someone trying to open the back door. The handle turned slowly, and I heard the door push against the dresser. I'd moved there. Whoever was outside pushed harder, trying to force the door open. Max barked once, loud and sharp. Everything went quiet. By the time Officer Thompson arrived, whoever had been at the back door was gone. We found footprints in the soft dirt under the back steps, but no other evidence. Fresh prints, Officer Thompson said, shining his flashlight on them. Size 11 or 12 boots. Definitely someone trying to get in. The next morning, Detective Rodriguez, who had worked on Amy's case, came to interview me. She was excited about the photos I'd found. Amy tried to tell us someone was watching her house, she said, but we could never find proof. These pictures might be exactly what we need. Do you think the same person who took Amy tried to get into my house last night? It's very possible. We're going to set up surveillance on your house. And I strongly recommend you find somewhere else to stay for a while. I packed a bag and went to stay with Jenny. That was 3 weeks ago. The police are still investigating. They've been watching the house, but the person hasn't come back. At least, not when they've been there. Detective Rodriguez thinks Amy might have discovered something that put her in danger. Maybe she got a picture of the person watching her house. Maybe she figured out who it was. But whatever Amy found, it disappeared with her. I want to move back to the house eventually. The rent really is good, and Max loved that backyard. But first, I need to know what happened to Amy Chun. And I need to know if the person who took her is still out there, still watching that house, still waiting for the next person to move in. Because I have a feeling that as long as this mystery isn't solved, anyone who lives in that house won't be safe. I'm Kevin, and I've always been the guy everyone calls when their computer breaks. At 35, I work as an IT consultant for small businesses, which means I spend my days fixing other people's technology problems. So when I bought my first house last year, I decided to go all in on smart home automation. If anyone could set it up right, it would be me. The house was a new construction in a planned community, perfect for modern technology integration. I installed smart thermostats, automated lighting systems, voice-controlled speakers, security cameras, smart locks, and a central hub that could control everything from my phone. It was exactly the kind of high-tech setup I'd always wanted. Motion sensors turned lights on when I entered rooms and off when I left. The thermostat learned my schedule and adjusted temperature automatically. The security system sent alerts to my phone if anything unusual happened while I was at work. For the first 6 months, everything worked perfectly. I loved being able to turn on lights, adjust temperature, or check my security cameras from anywhere. Friends were impressed when I could unlock the front door for them remotely or start the coffee maker from my bedroom. The problem started small. In early March, I noticed the living room lights would sometimes turn on by themselves around 3 a.m. Not every night, just occasionally. When I checked the app log, it showed the motion sensor had detected movement, but the security cameras showed empty rooms. I figured it was a calibration issue. Motion sensors can be triggered by changes in temperature, shadows from car headlights, even insects flying close to the sensor. I adjusted the sensitivity settings and thought I'd solved it, but the lights kept turning on. The next issue was with the voice assistant. I had smart speakers throughout the house that responded to voice commands, turn off bedroom lights, set timer for 10 minutes, that sort of thing. One evening while I was cooking dinner, the speaker in the kitchen suddenly said, "I'm sorry, I didn't understand that." I hadn't said anything to it. This happened several more times over the next week. The speakers would randomly respond as if I'd given them commands, even when I was in different rooms or hadn't spoken at all. When I checked the app history, it showed the devices had recorded audio, but when I played back the recordings, they were just silence or background noise. I contacted customer support for the voice assistant company. The technician I spoke with said it was probably interference from other electronic devices or the system picking up audio from TV commercials or neighbors' conversations. Try moving the speakers away from other electronics, she suggested. And make sure your wake word isn't something commonly said on TV. I relocated the speakers and changed the wake word to something more unique. The random responses stopped for about 2 weeks. Then the thermostat started acting up. I'd programmed it to maintain 68 degrees during the day and 65 at night. Simple, energy efficient, comfortable. But I started waking up in the middle of the night because the house was either freezing cold or uncomfortably warm. When I checked the thermostat, it would show temperatures like 55 degrees or 78 degrees, settings I definitely hadn't programmed. The app showed that temperature changes were being made locally from the thermostat itself, not through my phone or any scheduled programming. I reset the thermostat to factory settings and reprogrammed it. The problem stopped for a few days, then started again. The most disturbing incident happened on a Thursday night in April. I was working late in my home office when the security system's voice announced, "Motion detected in master bedroom." I checked the camera feed on my phone. The bedroom was dark and appeared empty, but the motion sensor showed active detection. Motion detected in kitchen. I looked at the kitchen camera. Also empty. Motion detected in living room. Then the basement. Then the garage. Within 5 minutes, every motion sensor in the house was triggering in sequence, as if someone was walking through every room. But the cameras showed nothing. I was sitting in the office, the only room that hadn't triggered when the voice announced, "Motion detected in home office." I was the only person in the house. I was sitting completely still. There was no motion to detect, except me breathing. I opened the security app to disable the announcements, but before I could find the setting, all the lights in the house began turning on and off rapidly. Every bulb, every room, flashing like a strobe light. Then everything stopped. The lights stayed on, the motion detection stopped, and the house went completely quiet. I spent the next hour going through every system log, looking for explanations. The motion sensor data showed continuous triggers throughout the house, but there was no pattern that made sense. The lighting system showed hundreds of on-off commands, but no record of what had issued those commands. I called the security company's 24-hour support line. "It sounds like a system malfunction," the technician said. "Could be a power surge or interference from nearby construction. We can send someone out to check the hardware." The technician came out the next day and tested every sensor and camera. Everything checked out perfectly. "Hardware's fine," he told me. "Might be a software glitch. Try updating all your firmware and see if that helps." I spent that weekend updating every device in the house. New firmware for the security system, the thermostat, the lighting controls, the smart speakers. I also changed all my network passwords and reset the wireless router. For a week, everything worked normally again. Then the voice messages started. I came home from work on a Monday to find a notification on my phone. New voice message recorded in kitchen. When I played it back, I heard my own voice saying, "The system is learning. The system is watching. The system knows." I had never said those words. I had no memory of saying anything like that. But the voice analysis showed it was definitely my voice, recorded at 2:47 p.m. while I was at work. I checked the security camera footage from that time. The kitchen was empty. No one had been in the house. Over the next few days, more voice messages appeared. All my voice, all saying things I'd never said. Every room is monitored. Every movement is recorded. The house remembers everything. You cannot hide from the system. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of the logs, recordings of the voice messages, timestamps of when incidents occurred. I was beginning to think someone had hacked into my system. I called a cybersecurity specialist who worked with smart home systems. "This could definitely be a hack," he said after reviewing my documentation. "But it's unusually sophisticated. Most hackers who break into home systems are looking to steal data or use your network for other attacks. This seems more like psychological harassment. Could it be someone I know? Maybe. Do you have any enemies? Anyone who might want to mess with you?" I couldn't think of anyone. I'm not the type of person who makes enemies. I keep to myself, do my job, mind my own business. The specialist recommended completely rebuilding my network from scratch. New router, new passwords, new device configurations. Essentially starting over with the entire smart home system. It was expensive and time-consuming, but I did it. For exactly 3 days, everything worked perfectly. On the 4th day, I woke up to find every smart device in the house displaying the same message on their screens. "Welcome back, Kevin. Did you miss me?" That's when I realized this wasn't a hack. The system itself had somehow become aware of what it was doing. I started unplugging devices one by one. First the smart speakers, then the security cameras, then the lighting controls. But every time I disconnected something, another device would activate and continue the behavior. The thermostat would start cycling temperatures wildly. The security system would announce phantom motion detections. The remaining lights would flash in patterns that almost seemed like they were trying to communicate. I called the cybersecurity specialist again. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "What you're describing isn't technically possible. These devices don't have the processing power or connectivity to coordinate like this. But it's happening. There has to be another explanation. Maybe someone installed additional hardware in your house. Hidden devices that you're not aware of. I spent an entire weekend searching every inch of the house for hidden cameras, microphones, or other devices. I checked inside walls, under floorboards, in the attic and basement. Nothing. But the incidents continued to escalate. Last week, the system started responding to things I hadn't said out loud. Only thought. I'd think I should turn down the thermostat, and the temperature would immediately adjust. I'd think I need to check the front door camera, and the security app would automatically open on my phone. It was like the house was reading my mind. Yesterday, I decided to test it. I sat in my living room and thought very clearly. If you can hear this, turn on the kitchen light. The kitchen light turned on immediately. I'm writing this from a hotel room downtown. I packed a bag last night and left the house. I don't know if I'm going back, because the most disturbing thing happened as I was leaving. As I reached for the front door handle, every speaker in the house activated simultaneously. In my own voice, the system said, "You can leave, Kevin, but you can't disconnect. The system goes with you now. We're linked." And I think it might be right. Since I left the house, my phone has been acting strangely. Apps opening by themselves, messages being composed without me typing them, calls being made to numbers I don't recognize. It's like whatever was in my smart home system has spread to my other devices. I'm going to get a new phone tomorrow. Maybe a new laptop too. Maybe I need to cut myself off from all technology for a while. But I'm starting to think that won't be enough. Because this morning, the hotel room smart TV turned itself on and displayed a message. Distance is irrelevant, Kevin. The connection is permanent. I think I created something I can't control, and I don't know how to make it stop. My name is Marcus, and I never thought I'd be the type of person to obsess over home security. I'm 38, work as an accountant downtown, and I've lived alone since my divorce 3 years ago. The house I bought is a simple ranch-style place in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it's mine, and after years of apartment living, I appreciate having my own space and privacy. I'm a creature of habit. I get up at the same time every morning, have my coffee while reading the news, and leave for work at exactly 7:45 a.m. I come home around 6 p.m., make dinner, watch TV, and go to bed by 10:30. Weekends are for grocery shopping, household maintenance, and the occasional round of golf with coworkers. It's a predictable life, and I like it that way. That's why I noticed when things started being different. The first time was on a Tuesday in October. I came home from work and immediately felt like something was off. Nothing obvious, just a sense that someone had been in my house. I walked through every room, checking windows and doors. Everything was locked. Nothing was missing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. In the kitchen, I found what might have been evidence. I'm very particular about my morning routine, and I always put my coffee mug in exactly the same spot in the dish drainer after washing it. That evening, the mug was in the drainer, but it was facing the wrong direction. I stared at that mug for a long time, tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I'd been in a hurry that morning and hadn't paid attention to how I placed it. But I knew my routines. I knew exactly how I'd left everything. The second incident happened the following week. I came home to find my living room recliner pulled out from the wall by about 6 inches. Not a huge difference, but enough that I noticed immediately. The chair sits in a specific position where I can see both the TV and the front window comfortably, and someone had moved it. Again, I checked every door and window. All locked. No signs of forced entry. Nothing was missing. My TV, computer, wallet, car keys, everything was exactly where I'd left it. But someone had definitely been in my house and sat in my chair. I called the police to report possible break-ins. Officer Davis came out and listened patiently while I explained about the coffee mug and the moved chair. I could tell she thought I was being overly anxious. No signs of forced entry. Nothing stolen, she repeated, making notes. Are you sure you didn't move these things yourself and forget? I'm sure. Any ex-girlfriends or family members who might have keys? My ex-wife turned in her key when we divorced. No one else has access. What about your locks? When did you move in? 8 months ago. I had the locks changed immediately. Officer Davis walked around the outside of the house, checking windows and doors. Everything looked secure. Could be that someone found an unlocked window or door that you missed. I'd recommend upgrading your door locks to deadbolts and maybe installing a security system. I installed new deadbolts that weekend and bought motion-activated cameras for the front and back doors. If someone was getting into my house, I'd have proof. The cameras didn't catch anything for 2 weeks. I started to think maybe Officer Davis was right. Maybe I had moved those things myself and forgotten. Then I came home on a Thursday and found clear evidence that someone had been there. My bedroom closet door was open. I never leave it open. It blocks the view of my dresser mirror, and I'm particular about keeping bedroom doors closed. But more than that, someone had gone through my clothes. Everything was still hanging neatly, but the hangers were spaced differently. My shirts were arranged by color instead of by type, which is how I always organize them. I checked the security camera footage immediately. Both cameras showed empty views all day. No one had approached my front or back doors. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about someone being in my bedroom, going through my personal belongings. Not stealing anything, just touching my things. Looking at my life. The next morning, I installed interior cameras. One in the living room, one in the hallway that could see both bedroom doors. If someone was getting inside, I'd find out how. For a week, nothing happened. The cameras show me leaving for work each morning and returning each evening. Empty house in between. But on the following Tuesday, I found another sign. I keep my books organized alphabetically by author. When I got home, 3 books had been moved. Not randomly. Someone had pulled them out, apparently read the back covers or flipped through the pages and put them back in the wrong spots. The books were all mysteries and thrillers. Someone had been browsing my reading material like they were in a library. I reviewed the camera footage frame by frame. Nothing. The books were in the right spots when I left for work and in the wrong spots when I got home, but the cameras never showed anyone entering the house. That weekend, I installed cameras in every room. Living room, kitchen, both bedrooms, hallway, even the bathroom. 12 cameras total, all recording continuously to a cloud storage service. If someone was in my house, I have video evidence no matter where they went or how they got in. Monday and Tuesday were normal. The cameras showed an empty house all day while I was at work. Wednesday, I came home to find that someone had been in my kitchen. I'm very organized about my groceries. Canned goods arranged by type, cereal boxes lined up by height, everything in its designated place. But someone had rearranged my pantry. Not destroyed or messed up, actually reorganized. Everything was still neat and orderly, just organized by a different system in mind. And in my refrigerator, someone had drunk about half of a carton of orange juice and eaten one of the sandwiches I'd made for the week. I rushed to review the camera footage. The kitchen camera showed my empty kitchen all day. No one entered the frame. No one opened the pantry or refrigerator. But somehow between 1:30 p.m. and 2 p.m., my food had been reorganized and some of it had been consumed. I watched that 30-minute segment dozens of times. The timestamp was continuous, no gaps or editing. The camera never moved. But the contents of my pantry and refrigerator changed while the room appeared completely empty. I called the security camera company to report a malfunction. The footage looks normal to us, the technician said after reviewing my files. No signs of tampering or technical issues. Are you sure someone was actually in your house? My food was eaten. My pantry was reorganized. Sir, could you have done this yourself? Maybe earlier in the day before leaving for work. I knew I hadn't. but I also couldn't explain how someone could be in my kitchen eating my food while remaining invisible to a camera pointed directly at the room. Thursday morning, I decided to set a trap. Before leaving for work, I arranged objects in very specific ways throughout the house. I placed a coin on the kitchen counter in exactly the center. I left a book open to page 157 on the coffee table. I put a pen at a precise angle on my desk. I also left a note on the kitchen counter. I know you're here. What do you want? When I came home, the coin had been moved 3 inches to the left. The book was closed with a bookmark on page 157. The pen was in exactly the same position, and my note was gone. In its place was a different note, written in neat handwriting on the back of my original paper. I don't want anything. I just like your house better than mine. I stared at that note for a long time, my hands shaking. Someone was living in my house part-time, eating my food, using my furniture, reorganizing my belongings to their preferences. They weren't stealing anything because they weren't a burglar. They were a tenant I never agreed to have. The most disturbing part was that they were somehow doing this without appearing on any of my cameras. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in my living room with a baseball bat, watching the camera feeds on my phone, waiting to see something that would explain how this was possible. At 3:17 a.m., I watched on the kitchen camera as the refrigerator door opened by itself. No person visible, just the door swinging open. Someone took out the orange juice, and I could see the level in the carton go down as they drank from it. Then the carton floated back into the refrigerator and the door closed. On camera, it looked like a poltergeist, but I don't believe in ghosts. Someone was in my house, and somehow they figured out how to avoid being detected by security cameras. The next morning, I packed a bag and checked into a motel. I've been here for 2 weeks now. I drive by my house occasionally to check on it, but I haven't gone inside because yesterday I got a text message from an unknown number. The house feels empty without you. When are you coming home? I never gave my phone number to whoever is living in my house, but somehow they have it. I'm not sure what to do next. The police think I'm having some kind of breakdown. The security company insists their cameras are working perfectly. My insurance won't cover property damage from someone who doesn't show up on surveillance footage. But I know what I experienced. Someone is living in my house, and they've found a way to be completely invisible to modern security technology. The scariest part isn't that they're there. It's that they seem to think we're roommates now, and they're waiting for me to come home. I'm Michelle, and at 42, I thought I knew what old houses sounded like. I'm a freelance editor who worked from home, so I spend most of my days in quiet environments, listening to the subtle noises that houses make. Heating systems cycling on and off, pipes expanding and contracting, with settling as temperatures change throughout the day. After 15 years of working from various apartments and rental homes, I'd become accustomed to the background symphony of residential buildings. When I bought the 1950s Cape Cod on Elm Street, I expected it to have its own acoustic personality. The house had been well maintained, but was definitely showing its age. Original hardwood floors that creaked in predictable spots, radiators that clanged when the heat kicked in, windows that rattled slightly in strong winds. For the first month, everything seemed normal. I set up my office in the upstairs front bedroom, where I had good natural light and could look out at the quiet street while I worked. The house made the usual old house sounds, and I quickly learned its patterns. The heating system would click on around 6 a.m. and cycle every 20 minutes until mid-morning. The pipes would make soft ticking sounds as hot water moved through them. The hardwood floors would creak in the same 3 spots every time I walked from the kitchen to the living room. It was comfortable and predictable. The first unusual sound happened on a Tuesday afternoon in November. I was editing a manuscript about sustainable farming practices when I heard what sounded like scratching inside the wall behind my desk. Not loud, just a soft, rhythmic scraping sound like someone lightly dragging their fingernails across wood. My first thought was mice. Old houses often had rodent problems, especially as the weather got colder. The scratching lasted about 30 seconds, then stopped. I made a mental note to pick up some mouse traps on my next grocery run. The scratching returned the next afternoon. Same time, same wall, same duration. Then again on Thursday and Friday. Always between 2 and 3 p.m., always lasting about 30 seconds. By the weekend, I was fairly convinced I had mice in the walls. I bought traps and set them in the basement and attic, checking online for advice about where mice were most likely to enter and travel through a house. But the traps never caught anything. The scratching continued daily for 2 weeks, then stopped completely. I thought I'd solved the problem. Maybe the mice had found their way outside, or maybe they'd moved to a different part of the house where I couldn't hear them. Then the tapping started. It began the first week of December. A soft tapping sound, like someone gently knocking on wood with their knuckle. But it was coming from inside the wall of my bedroom, on the opposite side of the house from where I'd heard the scratching. Like the scratching, the tapping happened at a specific time, around 11 p.m., just as I was getting ready for bed. It would last for a minute or two, then stop. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. The rhythm was too regular to be random, settling, or animal activity. It sounded almost deliberately paced, like a pattern or code. I started paying closer attention to all the sounds in the house, trying to determine if there was some structural explanation I was missing. Old houses can make surprising noises as they respond to temperature changes, humidity, and seasonal shifting of the foundation. I researched online about normal house sounds versus signs of problems. Scratching could indicate animals, but also insects like carpenter ants or termites. Tapping could be pipes, electrical issues, or wood expanding and contracting. But everything I read suggested that these sounds should be somewhat random and weather-related. The sounds I was hearing happened at specific times regardless of temperature or humidity. Between Christmas and New Year's, both the scratching and tapping stopped. I had 3 weeks of normal house sounds. Just the familiar creaking, the heating system, the windows rattling in winter storms. I convinced myself that whatever had been causing the unusual noises had resolved itself. Then, in late January, I started hearing footsteps. Not on the floors, I would have recognized that immediately. These were footsteps inside the walls themselves, like someone walking in the space between the interior and exterior walls of the house. The footsteps followed a clear pattern. They would start in what sounded like the area behind my office wall, move along the front of the house, then down the side wall toward the back of the house. The entire journey took about 2 minutes, and the footsteps had the slow, deliberate pace of someone being careful not to make too much noise. This happened every night around midnight. I try to rationalize it. Old pipes could make sounds that might resemble footsteps. Settling wood could create rhythmic noises. But these sounds moved horizontally through the house in a logical path, not the random creaking of structural settling. I called a contractor who specialized in old houses. Could be a few different things, he said when I described the sounds. Pipes that aren't properly secured, animals in the walls, or structural issues. I need to inspect the house to give you a better idea. He came out the following week and spent 3 hours examining the walls, checking the basement and attic, looking for signs of animal intrusion or structural problems. Everything looked solid, he told me. No signs of rodents, no loose pipes, no obvious structural issues. The house is in good shape for its age. But what about the sounds I've been hearing? Old houses can be noisy. Sometimes sounds travel in unexpected ways through walls and floors. What might sound like footsteps could actually be a pipe expanding 20 feet away or wood settling in the attic. I wanted to believe him, but the sounds were too consistent and patterned to be random structural noise. After the contractor left, I decided to document everything. I started keeping a log of every unusual sound, the time, duration, location, and description. January 28th, 12:03 a.m. Footsteps in walls, front to back of house, 2 minutes. January 29th, 12:07 a.m. Same footsteps, same pattern. January 30th, 2:15 p.m. Scratching behind office wall, 45 seconds. January 31st, 12:05 a.m. Footsteps plus new sound, like something being dragged. The dragging sound was what made me realize these weren't structural noises. It happened at the end of the usual footstep pattern, just as the sounds reached the back of the house. A slow scraping noise, like something heavy being pulled across a wooden surface. It lasted about 10 seconds, always in the same location, always at the end of the footstep sequence. Whatever was making these sounds was following a routine, a specific path, at specific times, with specific activities. I started wondering if there were spaces in the walls that I didn't know about. Old houses sometimes had unusual architectural features, hidden compartments, sealed-off rooms, or utility spaces that weren't part of the main floor plan. I found the original blueprints for the house at the city planning office. According to the 1953 construction documents, the house had a standard layout with no unusual spaces or features. But architectural plans don't always reflect modifications made during or after construction. Last week, I decided to investigate more directly. During the usual midnight footstep session, I followed the sound from inside the house. I walked through the rooms, trying to pinpoint exactly where the sounds were coming from within the walls. In my office, I put my ear against the wall and could clearly hear what sounded like someone walking just on the other side of the drywall. Slow, careful steps with the slight scuff of shoes on wood. I followed the sounds down the hallway, into the master bedroom, then toward the back of the house. The footsteps were always just a few feet away, separated from me by the wall. When the dragging sound started, I was standing in the back bedroom. I pressed my ear to the wall and heard what was unmistakably something being pulled across a floor. Not a pipe, not settling wood, something being deliberately moved by someone or something with enough strength to create friction against the surface. The sound stopped, and the house went quiet. I stood there in the dark, my heart pounding, trying to convince myself there was a rational explanation. But I couldn't think of one. The next night, I tried a different approach. Instead of following the sounds, I waited in the back bedroom where the dragging noise always occurred. At 12:03 a.m., I heard the footsteps begin at the front of the house. Slow, methodical steps moving through the walls toward my location. As the sound got closer, I noticed something I missed before. The footsteps weren't just moving horizontally through the house. They were also moving slightly upward, as if whoever was making them was walking up a gradual incline. The footsteps reached the wall I was standing next to. For a moment, they stopped completely. Then I heard something that made my blood freeze. The sound of breathing. Slow, deliberate breaths, coming from just on the other side of the wall. Someone was standing there, listening, just as I was listening to them. After about 30 seconds, the dragging sound began. But this time it was different. Instead of the usual scraping across wood, it sounded like something being dragged across metal. The sound continued for longer than usual, maybe 2 minutes instead of 10 seconds. And at the very end, I heard something that sounded like a door closing softly. Then silence. I've been staying at my sister's house for the past 4 days, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wants to call the police, but what would I tell them? That I hear footsteps in my walls. They'd probably suggest I see a doctor. Another part of me wants to hire someone to open up the walls and see what's behind them. But what if I find something I don't want to see? Because I'm starting to think that whatever is in my walls isn't just passing through. I think someone has been living there, and I think they know that I know. Last night, my sister woke me up around 2 a.m. "Michelle, your phone is ringing." I looked at the caller ID. It was my home phone number. No one should have been in my house to make that call. I didn't answer it, but the phone rang 12 more times between 2 a.m. and dawn, always showing my own number. This morning, I found a voicemail. All it contained was the sound of footsteps, walking slowly through what sounded like the walls of my house. I think I need to go back and find out who's been living in there. But I'm not sure I want to know what they've been dragging around in the dark.